She raised 4 children on her own after losing her husband in a workplace accident. She paid the bills, kept her head down, and did everything right. But the moment the insurance money ran dry, the love ran out with it. This Christmas, her family set a full table, but left 5 chairs empty. Years later, they came knocking again, not with apologies, but with desperation. And what she gave them in return wasn't money. It was proof. Proof of everything they had once denied: her pain, her worth, their cruelty. What would you do if the people who turned you away came back asking for help? Would you forgive, forget, or finally speak the truth? Watch until the end to decide. And if this story strikes a chord, share your thoughts in the comments. Your voice matters more than you think. Like, subscribe, and let's explore what it means to draw the line with love. There was no snow that night, only frost biting at the windows. Inside, the house buzzed with chatter and laughter, silverware clinking against porcelain plates. Candles flickered on the long oak table, illuminating a feast worthy of a magazine spread. Honey-roasted ham, cranberry stuffing, sweet potato pie. But outside the window, in the corner shadows of the porch, Jasmine Carter sat with her 4 children, their coats zipped to the chin, their mittens clutching a paper bag of warm rolls she had baked herself. No one had told them not to come. No one had told them they weren't welcome, but no one made space for them either. And that silence spoke louder than any slammed door. Jasmine Carter wasn't always the woman left out in the cold. Years ago, when the world fell apart, she was the one everyone praised for holding it together. Her husband, Malcolm, died suddenly, an accident in a steel factory just days before Christmas. One missed safety check, and that was it. 4 children under the age of 10, a mortgage still fresh, and grief hanging like smoke in every room. She didn't cry at the funeral. Not in front of them. Instead, she buttoned her coat, walked into the insurance office, and did what had to be done. With the settlement, she paid off the house, covered the hospital bills that weren't supposed to be theirs, and tucked away what she could for the future. At first, her family wrapped around her. They brought casseroles, offered help with the kids, and even joked gently, like maybe the silence wouldn't last forever. But grief is patient. It waits until casseroles turn cold, until kindness becomes routine, and then it asks, who's still standing with you when there's nothing left to hand out? Jasmine didn't notice the shift at first, but something in their eyes began to change. Not pity, not worry, just calculation. It began with small things, missed calls returned hours later. Invitations that used to arrive weeks ahead now came the night before, if at all. When Jasmine's youngest, Lex, caught the flu, she texted her mother asking if someone could pick up ginger tea on the way over. The reply was polite, but distant. Maybe try the CVS near you, sweetie. That word, sweetie, used to feel like warmth. Now it sounded like a dismissal in disguise. Her sister, Camille, who once praised Jasmine as the strongest woman I know, began referring to her in the past tense, even when she was standing right there. Jazz was always so organized. Was? Jasmine started to feel like a ghost in her own life, present, but not included. Then came the comments. Not from strangers, but from those whose approval used to mean everything. At a Sunday lunch, her uncle leaned in over his wineglass and said, "I just don't know how you manage with all those kids. Different dads, right?" Jasmine blinked. "No," she said calmly. "One father, my husband." "You were at the funeral." He laughed, light, dismissive. Right. My mistake." But it wasn't a mistake. It was a message. One that told her, "You don't belong here the way you think you do." The inheritance money, the so-called gift from heaven as her aunt once called it, was nearly gone. She'd stretched it the best she could, fixing the roof, upgrading their ancient minivan, and paying for speech therapy when one of the twins began stuttering under stress. Not once did she spend it on herself. No vacations. No new wardrobe. No spa days or indulgences. She lived on coupons and bulk bags of rice. But still, when the money thinned, so did the warmth in her family's eyes. One night, Jasmine overheard her brother whispering to their mother in the kitchen. "I mean, she's got to be playing the long game, right? Single mom of 4, no steady job. She'll come asking sooner or later." Her mother didn't disagree. She just stirred her tea and said, "I hope she knows better." That was when Jasmine understood. Their love had an expiration date. And that date was printed right on the last insurance deposit. Christmas was always her husband's favorite time of year. Malcolm would hang lights the weekend after Thanksgiving, not a day later. He had a ritual. Hot cocoa on the porch, old jazz crackling from the radio, and the kids wrapped in blankets while he strung bulbs along the eaves, humming to himself. Jasmine kept the tradition alive for years after he passed, because that's what he would have wanted. But this year was different. That morning, she baked cinnamon rolls before sunrise. The kids woke to the smell, excited, dancing around the table in footy pajamas. Annie, her eldest, carefully packed the gifts they'd wrapped with newspaper comics and twine. Each child had made something by hand, painted rocks, bookmarks, drawings with jagged hearts and stick figures labeled Grandma and Uncle Mike. Jasmine wore her best blouse and the earrings Malcolm gave her when she delivered the twins. She reminded them, like always, be kind, be grateful. Even if it's different this year. But when they arrived, something felt off. The driveway was packed with cars, the porch glowing with laughter and music, but no one came out to greet them. Jasmine knocked twice before Camille opened the door, blocking the entry with her body. "Hey," she said flatly, eyes darting past Jasmine to the minivan. "I thought you weren't coming." Jasmine blinked. "You sent the invite." Said 2 o'clock. "Oh, well, we're kind of full. You know how the living room gets." Camille's voice was syrupy, but her mouth never smiled. From behind her, someone called out, "Camille, close the door. You're letting the heat out." Camille didn't move. Jasmine's heart pounded in her chest. "I brought food," Jasmine offered, holding up the tray. "Yeah, it's just, there's really not space this year. Mom's stress has been acting up, and with the kids and all." A small hand slipped into hers. It was Lex, his mitten falling off. He looked up and asked, "Are we not going in, Mommy?" That was the moment it shifted, from confusion to clarity. They weren't welcome, not by accident, not by mistake. It was intentional. Quiet, cruel, and final. Jasmine turned around without a word, her children trailing behind, gifts still in their arms. Behind her, the door clicked shut. No one called her name. No one asked her to stay. They drove for miles without speaking. The tray of cinnamon rolls sat untouched on the passenger seat, still warm beneath its foil cover. Jasmine kept one hand on the wheel, and the other wrapped around Lex's small mitten, holding it even after he dozed off in his booster seat. The sky was pale gray, the kind of color that made everything feel heavier. In the rear-view mirror, she saw Annie staring out the window, her jaw tight, eyes unreadable. She pulled into the parking lot of an old church thrift shop. It was closed, of course, Christmas Day, but the lot was empty, and the building offered a sliver of shelter from the wind. Jasmine parked near the brick wall, turned off the engine, and exhaled slowly. Her breath clouded the windshield. "I just need a second," she whispered. Annie spoke first. Was it me? Jasmine's head turned. What? Was it because I said I didn't want to hug Uncle Mike last time? Was that why we weren't allowed in? Her chest cracked open. No, baby. It has nothing to do with you. Then what did we do? Annie's voice was a mixture of 10-year-old logic and a hurt too old for her years. Why didn't they want us there? Jasmine looked at all four of them. The twins were curled against each other, and Lex was snoring gently, his cheeks flushed pink from the cold. It's not about what we did, she said quietly. It's about who we are. But they're our family. Jasmine nodded. That's what makes it hurt the most. Annie didn't cry. She just pressed her forehead to the window and stared at the slush-covered pavement. Jasmine reached into the tray, broke off a cinnamon roll, and handed it to her. Then she passed one to each sleeping child, careful not to wake them. She kept the last for herself, though she wasn't hungry. The quiet stretched, and then Annie whispered, "We don't have anywhere to go, do we?" Jasmine hesitated. She had friends, acquaintances really, but it was Christmas. People had their own families, their own fires to sit by. The truth was, she hadn't planned for this. Not today, not like this. No, she admitted. Not right now, but we'll figure it out. Annie finally turned to face her. How? Jasmine took a deep breath and stared out at the frozen world in front of them. The same way we always do, one honest step at a time. Just then, a knock on her window startled her. An elderly woman with white curls and a red scarf stood outside, smiling softly, a grocery bag in her arms. Jasmine rolled the window down halfway. "Y'all okay out here?" the woman asked, her southern drawl warm and unhurried. "It's cold enough to break your bones." "We're all right," Jasmine said, forcing a smile. "Just needed a moment." The woman peered in, saw the kids, and nodded. "You follow me. I got stew on the stove, and no one to eat it but me. Ain't no sense sitting out here with babies." Jasmine hesitated. The woman leaned closer. "Honey, loneliness don't discriminate. Let me do a good thing before the year's out." That night, for the first time in weeks, Jasmine sat at a table where no one judged her children's skin. No one asked what she had left to offer. Only simple kindness, served warm, with cornbread and silence that didn't hurt. The next morning, Jasmine woke up on a pull-out couch with Lex curled against her chest and the twins tangled at her feet like warm, breathing blankets. The air smelled like cedarwood and dish soap. Sunlight streamed through the floral curtains in gentle streaks. For a fleeting second, she forgot where she was. Forgot the porch, the locked door, the sting of being turned away. Then she heard humming from the kitchen. Annie was there, sitting at the breakfast table beside the older woman, who was now in a faded blue robe, stirring something in a pot. They looked like they'd been talking for a while, two souls bridging generations through quiet morning ritual. "She said her name's Miss Etta," Annie whispered later, when Jasmine came to check on them. "She used to be a nurse. Lost her husband too. Said sometimes God brings lost people together just so they remember they're not broken." Jasmine nodded. There was a softness in Miss Etta's eyes that didn't ask questions. She didn't probe or pity. She just set out 5 bowls of oatmeal and poured strong coffee into a mug with a chipped rim that read, "Peace lives here." By noon, Jasmine had checked her phone. No missed calls, no messages. Not even from Camille. The silence was more deliberate than ever. Miss Etta offered them the guest room for another night. "I got blankets and good locks. That's more than some have," she said with a shrug. Jasmine tried to refuse, but the way Miss Etta held her gaze made it clear. It wasn't charity. It was choice. That afternoon, Jasmine walked 3 blocks to the public library and printed out her resume. She hadn't updated it since Malcolm passed. Under experience, she added what no employer ever saw: 4 kids fed, kept warm, educated, and alive, on grief, grit, and leftover rice. The next day, she knocked on the back door of a local bakery. The manager, a middle-aged woman named Cora, with a flour-streaked apron and tired eyes, looked her up and down. "You ever work in a kitchen before?" Jasmine shook her head. "No, but I know how to make cinnamon rolls that make kids forgive each other." Cora smirked. "You show up on time, keep your head down, and don't steal the cookie dough. That'll do." It wasn't glamorous, but it was hers. 5 hours a day, 6 days a week. Miss Etta agreed to watch the kids after school in exchange for Jasmine helping her with groceries and cleaning. It wasn't much, but it was dignity. Jasmine had learned something vital. Sometimes rebuilding doesn't begin with a grant, a loan, or a second chance. Sometimes it begins with a stranger who sees you, not for what you've lost, but for what you still carry. And Jasmine carried something unshakable now. Not just the weight of survival, but the strength of someone who had been discarded and kept standing anyway. It was nearly spring when the phone rang. Jasmine was folding laundry on the living room floor. Lex's socks, the twins' hand-me-down jeans, Annie's worn hoodie she refused to part with. Miss Etta was humming in the kitchen, preparing black-eyed peas for Sunday dinner. The number on the screen made Jasmine pause. Her mother's landline. She let it ring 4 times before answering. "Hello?" There was a long silence, then a familiar voice, stiff and overly composed. "Jasmine." "It's Mom." Jasmine didn't respond right away. The silence on her end wasn't icy. It was waiting. Her mother cleared her throat. "We've had some trouble. Your brother made some poor decisions." Jasmine said nothing. "The house is gone," her mother finally said. "He refinanced it without telling us. Lost it all in some gambling scheme. Your father's pension wasn't enough to cover the difference." Jasmine's stomach didn't drop. Her hands didn't shake. Not this time. Instead, she quietly said, "I'm sorry to hear that." Her mother hesitated. "We were hoping. We thought maybe you could help us. Just until we get back on our feet." Jasmine stood up slowly, holding a small shirt still warm from the dryer. "Like the way you helped us when we were standing in your driveway on Christmas Day." "Jasmine, that wasn't..." It was exactly what it was. There was a pause on the other end. Then, "You're not still angry, are you?" Jasmine exhaled, long and soft. "No. I'm not angry, I'm just done pretending." She didn't hang up. Not yet. Instead, she walked over to the table and pulled out a sealed envelope she'd been keeping for a moment like this. Inside were photocopies of every message they'd ignored, every utility bill she paid in silence, every voice memo from Annie asking why Grandma didn't want to see her anymore. "I'm not sending money," she said evenly, "but I'll send something else. Something honest." She ended the call gently, then addressed the envelope, placed it beside the door, and returned to folding clothes, piece by piece, life by life, no longer waiting to be invited in. The envelope arrived 2 days later. Jasmine sent it priority mail, not out of urgency, but precision. She wanted them to see it arrive, to feel the weight of it in their hands. Inside, she'd included everything they'd refused to acknowledge for years. The check stubs from the rent she'd paid on their behalf. Copies of grocery receipts from when her mother was too tired to shop. And the Christmas card her youngest had made, but never got to deliver. Crayoned hearts and stick figures labeled with names that still stung to read. At the very top, she'd written one sentence in her own careful handwriting. "This is the record of a daughter you turned away. Because love without utility was never enough for you. She never got a reply. Not a phone call, not even a text. But a week later, Miss Etta returned from checking the mail with a thin package addressed to Jasmine. No return address, just her name in shaky cursive. Inside was a photograph, one she hadn't seen in years. It showed a younger Jasmine, holding Malcolm's hand outside the hospital the day the twins were born. Her mother must have taken it. On the back was a single line, scribbled in ink so faint it nearly vanished into the paper. "We did love you. We just didn't know how." Jasmine stared at the photo for a long time. Not out of nostalgia, but clarity. That sentence, like so many before it, was not an apology. It was a confession without ownership. A truth without repair. She tucked the picture into a box marked before, along with a pair of Malcolm's old gloves, the kids' first drawings, and the last unopened letter from her sister. Then she closed the lid. Later that evening, Annie found her outside on the porch, sipping tea, her gaze fixed on the horizon. "You okay, Mom?" Jasmine smiled, soft and sure. "I'm not waiting anymore," she said. "That's the difference." Annie sat beside her, swinging her legs over the edge of the step. "Are they going to call again?" Jasmine shook her head. "Maybe, maybe not. Either way, we'll be just fine." The smell of cinnamon and yeast filled the small kitchen as Lex stood on a step stool, proudly brushing melted butter over the tops of the rising rolls. The twins were stringing paper garlands in the doorway, and Annie sat cross-legged on the floor, carefully taping name tags onto handmade gift boxes. They had voted to celebrate early this year. Our own holiday, Annie called it, one without expectations, obligations, or chairs left empty. Jasmine moved through the kitchen with practiced calm, wearing a borrowed apron too big for her frame, but filled with purpose. Miss Etta, now considered family more than neighbor, stirred sweet potato mash with a wooden spoon that had seen 3 generations of Sunday suppers. There was no expensive china, no holiday playlist curated for guests who might judge the background noise. Just the hum of life, laughter, pots clanging, children whispering secrets and running through a house that felt like theirs, even if their name wasn't on the deed. After dinner, they gathered around the small dining table, mismatched chairs pressed tight together. Annie stood up and held her cup like a microphone. "I have a toast," she said, with more authority than a 10-year-old should rightly possess, "to people who show up, even when they don't have to. Especially then." Everyone clinked glasses, water, juice, lukewarm cider. And Jasmine felt something loosen in her chest. Not closure exactly, but something more useful. Peace. That night, after the kids had gone to bed, Jasmine uploaded a video to her tiny baking channel. It was just her and Lex in the frame, laughing as they kneaded dough and told stories. No bitterness. No explanation. Just warmth. And somehow that video traveled. Not viral, but far enough for the right people to find it. Weeks passed. The days grew longer, and the air began to soften with early spring. Jasmine's life, once frayed and uncertain, settled into a quiet rhythm. Morning shifts at the bakery, afternoons helping Miss Etta with her garden, evenings spent around the table with her kids, where every meal felt earned, not owed. Then, one evening, as the sun dipped low behind the rooftops, Annie came rushing in from the living room, phone in hand. "Mom, you're on the news." Jasmine frowned, drying her hands on a dish towel. "What do you mean?" Annie spun the phone around. A local TV segment was playing, Community Spotlight, and there it was, a clip from Jasmine's video showing Lex laughing with flour on his nose. The anchor's voice came in. A mother of 4, turning hardship into healing. one tray of cinnamon rolls at a time. Jasmine stared at the screen, stunned. Then, below the clip, comments began flooding in. Strangers, neighbors, even familiar names from the past. Not pity, not charity. Gratitude, admiration, connection. One comment read, "I grew up like this. She's telling my story." Another, "I haven't spoken to my daughter in 3 years. I'm calling her tonight." Jasmine closed her eyes for a moment. Not to escape it, but to hold it. To remember the porch, the silence, the aching cold of being left out, and the warmth of choosing herself instead. That night, she didn't draft a new letter. She didn't send money. She simply wrote a sentence on a post-it note and stuck it to the fridge. Love is not what you say. It's what you hold on to when everything else lets go. And for the first time in years, Jasmine allowed herself to sleep without waiting for anyone to come back.